Welcome back to Pagitt Radio, 150, 10 minutes before 2, our final segment called Right On, where we give a call out to anybody whose strength is bringing strength, whose faith is bringing faith, whose hope is bringing hope, and whose love is bringing love. We think that there's something going on in this world that all humanity participates in together. And part of the expression of this segment is to cheer on those who are making the world the way that we want it to go, making the world that we all want to live in. So we give a call out to those who are doing that. And Rabbi Joseph and I were having this conversation about the role of religion and pluralism inside of the current events, and we're going to carry this over into the Right On segment. And here's how, just to give to give some structure to the radio program for those who demand the Right On to be its own segment. Anyone who's going to accomplish the things that we are going to be talking about, acknowledging that when we're talking about it, we're probably talking about it longing to be the ones who are doing it better. So it's not saying do it like us. It's saying anyone who is accomplishing what we are longing for, they get the Right On. And it may or may not be us all the time. Fair enough?
Oh, absolutely. I think
so. So there's a big issue for religious people who take religion seriously to know how do you do that inside the confines of shared life with those who think differently than you, who are religious perhaps or are secular. And I would argue that we are experimenting now with a kind of humanity that we've never had before. That in the 5,000 years of recorded human history and the 4 billion years of the development of human life on this planet, never have we had cities, urban environments, whole nations, and nations around the world integrated into one another's business in proximity and thought and shared language, coming from different cultures that have organized their religious expressions in different ways. Never has that all been mixed up the way that it is now.
And we witness that with a real-time simultaneity for which we don't have a old playbook. So as we're watching, listening, getting tweets, referencing Facebook, getting live streams, we really don't know what that means. And our impatience with revolution, I think, is a fallback on, wow, how long should we be spending with this? Your use of the idiom secular, I say that we have to go back in North America and look at the way the religious communities have often demonized the secular as the over and against. Because how curious, how ironic that we're looking at North Africa and saying, whoa.
And fearful of secularism.
I hope that Tunisia winds up being secular. I hope Egypt winds up being secular.
Because the alternative is trouble.
We're even more frightened of.
You know, George Bush, on September 20th of 2001, 9 days after the September 11th attack, made a speech before Congress and before the United States. It was sort of the big moment, right? And in that speech, there's a couple of pieces of this that I find interesting. And while many people who are adherent to the opinions of conservatism in the United States might not think that this is what you'd be hearing from then the conservative president, he wrote this, or said this: "This is not, however, just America's fight this night. And what is at stake is not America's freedom. This is the world's fight. This is civilization's fight. This is the fight of all who believe in progress and pluralism, tolerance, and freedom." It's so interesting that the launch of that whole sort of conservative effort, which really got off track with all of its Iraq stuff and all the crazy business that happened there, right, with the war, and the people who turned forward and against it, what that speech was sort of indicating is there's now something in common for all of us in the world, and that thing that's in common is progress and pluralism, tolerance and freedom.
And a decade later, for reasons that may be much more about economics than political ideology.
I think you're on something.
People are moving into public squares and demanding revolution.
Yeah. And how do we view that? How do we look at it? And for religious people who want their religious story to be important, right? Because that's why I'm a pastor and started a church. That's why you're a rabbi, because we think that the religious expression makes a positive contribution to the world. Now, that can be difficult to argue some points.
It will always be difficult.
that might be a presupposition that's, that has trouble being made sometimes. But that's why we do it. It's hard for us to then want to say, okay, well, ours is simply one contribution. I mean, isn't it? I mean, was that hard for you as a rabbi? Is that hard for you as a rabbi?
I think that whether it was the time I spent on the pulpit, the time I'm spending now in academics, let's take our Thursday night experiment at Solomon's Porch.
Yeah, so Thursday nights you do a Torah reading. We do a dialogue around from a Jewish community and a Christian community, saying how do you interact with the idea and the teachings of the Torah and the teachings that come from Torah, and how do you do that in an interfaith dialogue on Thursday night, 7:30? People will come.
Right, and when you look at a few chapters of Exodus, this week we're going to do the closing chapters of Exodus. What does that mean outside of a synagogue where what people have read and expect to read is so different? So we've got our own little laboratory on Thursday nights about how to use your model of one-to-one dialogue in a community to slowly, painfully, methodically change people's perceptions. That's what's going on right now in the broad sweep of world history. How are you going to live with radically transformed perceptions?
Yeah, and it's not clear that we know how to do this yet.
I don't think we do.
Which I find really scary, frankly, but quite exciting too. Like the fact that there is an opportunity for those of us who have engagement with these ideas in this world that in the future, people will look back on and say, how did they do it? How did it go? I mean, that's what people mean, I think, when they say we're living in historic times.
Oh, everybody should literally be journaling now.
Yes.
Because if you want to often look at great historic moments and say, I wonder what they were doing. Well, we're in those times, and your children and grandchildren will be able to ask, well, what were they thinking about?
Yeah.
What does it mean to turn on the TV and 1 week later say, wow, that guy Gaddafi's going to fall now?
Yeah, unbelievable. And that's why I guess people in the future will say, I wonder what Grandpappy's, great-grandpappy's tweets were all about.
Yeah.
All right, so the right-on goes out to everyone who believes in progress and pluralism, tolerance and freedom, who's trying to figure out how to live that out in the world that we live in, whether you can be a conservative, fair enough, who does it in the spirit of George Bush, who first proclaimed this as civilization's fight to believe in progress and pluralism, tolerance and freedom, or you come from the tradition of the rabbi, or you come from the tradition of Christianity, or you come from the tradition of flat-out secularism, or other views. Anyone who's trying to work this out, right on from Doug Badger Radio, right on for those who are trying to live out the good things in our world. We'll be back with you next week.
It's often said, all politics are local. Well, the same holds true for our commerce. For example,